Welcome to A Slice with Dice, where education meets inspiration and leadership meets real life. I'm Corey Alderdice, Executive Director of the Arkansas School for Mathematics, Sciences, and the Arts. With 2 decades in school leadership, I'll share what I've learned from walking the tightrope between policy and practice, especially when it comes to doing right by gifted students and their futures. Ready to dive in? Here's this week's Slice. Over the past 5 episodes, we've explored dissatisfaction as the signal that drives student growth. We've traced it through 3 intentionalities: eclipse, evolve, and escape. We've seen how those intentionalities blend into the paradigms of transitional, transformational, typical, and at the center, catalytic agency. We've talked about the levers of practice, accelerate, elevate, and separate, and how sequencing of those matters. And in that last episode, we paused to look closely at catalytic agency itself, the comprehensive dissatisfaction that makes the case for specialized environments, and especially for residential schools. So here we are, at the conclusion of this series, and today I want to broaden the lens and ask, what does all of this mean for equity, for policy, and for the future of talent development? And more specifically, what does it mean for the continued role of specialized and residential schools in that ecosystem? Let's start with equity. Too often, gifted education has been seen as something reserved for the already advantaged, the students with high test scores, motivated families, and access to resources. But the reality is that the dissatisfaction cuts across every background. Students in well-resourced districts experience eclipse. They want more than what the curriculum offers. Students in marginalized communities experience evolve. They want affirmation of their identity and recognition of their potential. Students in rural schools experience eclipse. They want out of environments where opportunity feels too scarce. Dissatisfaction is not limited by zip code, income level, or cultural background. It's universal. But what is not universal is access to the opportunities that close satisfaction gaps. Some students live in districts that can offer multiple AP courses, dual enrollment, mentorship programs, or specialized academies. Others live in communities where those opportunities simply don't exist. And that's where the equity challenge becomes clear. If dissatisfaction is universal, then opportunity must be universal too. This is where specialized and residential schools step in. They're not boutique options for a privileged few, though they are often caricatured that way. At their best, they are engines of equity. Think about those transformational students, the diamonds in the rough who crave affirmation and a new environment. For many of them, a residential school may be the first place where they feel both seen and stretched. It's where their dissatisfaction is finally met with opportunity, where they can reimagine what they're capable of becoming. Or consider catalytic students, those whose dissatisfaction is comprehensive. They need acceleration, elevation, and separation all at once. Traditional schools, even strong ones, often struggle to meet those needs simultaneously. But residential schools are designed to do exactly that. They accelerate through advanced coursework, elevate through cultures of belonging and mentorship, and separate by creating an entirely new living and learning environment. For catalytic students, these schools are not a luxury. They're a lifeline. Specialized schools also serve as proof points. They demonstrate what it looks like to design environments around dissatisfaction and agency rather than compliance and seat time. They become laboratories of practice, helping to show traditional schools what's possible when we take dissatisfaction seriously and respond holistically. So what does that mean for policy? First, it means that funding for acceleration cannot only flow to well-sourced districts. Every student who expresses eclipse dissatisfaction should have access to advanced coursework, whether through virtual options, regional programs, or dual enrollment partnerships. States should fund these opportunities equitably, not just at urban centers, but in rural communities too. Second, it means that elevation must be recognized as a legitimate educational outcome. Mentoring, identity-affirming initiatives, and recognition systems are not extras. They are central to meeting evolved dissatisfaction. Policy should support professional development for teachers in culturally responsive practice, fund mentoring programs, and hold schools accountable for creating inclusive cultures. Third, it means that separation must be understood as opportunity creation, not exclusion. When students express escape dissatisfaction, policy should support specialized and residential programs that provide new context. That includes transportation funding, scholarships, and outreach to underrepresented communities. Too often, these schools are framed as elitist, when in reality, they are equity engines, especially when states commit to broad access. Finally, it means that accountability systems should evolve. Right now, schools are judged largely on standardized test scores and graduation rates. But what if we also measured responsiveness? What if schools were evaluated on how well they closed those satisfaction gaps, on how well they accelerated, elevated, and separated where needed? That shift would send a powerful signal that student agency matters. Now, I want to be clear, this is not just about catalytic students or even just about those who attend specialized schools. Transitional, transformational, and typical gifted students all deserve thoughtful responses. They are everywhere, in neighborhood schools, in charter schools, in private schools. This model we've discussed is not just about building a hierarchy of who matters most. It's about listening more carefully to every voice of student dissatisfaction in learning and responding with precision. But equity also demands that we pay special attention to those whose dissatisfaction is most often overlooked, like transformational students in rural districts, the typical students dismissed as lazy, and the catalytic students who seem too much for traditional schools. These are the learners. They're the ones who are most likely to fall through the cracks if we don't act. This is why protecting and investing in specialized and residential schools, as well as gifted education at large, is so important. They are not just enrichment programs for students who would succeed anyway. They are essential options for students whose dissatisfaction cannot be resolved within the walls of their local schools. And when we invest in them, when we don't just serve the students who attend, we serve the whole system. Because the innovations developed in these schools, the way that they integrate acceleration, elevation, and separation, it spills outward. They become models for how traditional schools can respond to dissatisfaction more effectively. In other words, specialized and residential schools are not competitors to traditional schools. They are partners. They are part of an ecosystem that together ensures that every student's dissatisfaction can be met with opportunity. So where does that leave us? Well, we've talked about dissatisfaction as the signal, intentionalities as the voice, paradigms as the blends, and levers as the responses. We've seen how some students can be supported within traditional schools, while others need entirely new environments. And we've argued that equity demands universal access to opportunity, not just for the well-resourced, but for every student in every community. The challenge now is to listen and to act. Policymakers must fund acceleration, elevation, and separation equitably. Educators must interpret dissatisfaction as readiness, not as defiance. Leaders must protect and expand specialized and residential schools as vital equity tools, not as luxuries to be considered on occasion. Because in the end, dissatisfaction is universal. The question is not whether students experience it. The question is whether we will hear it and whether we will respond. If we do, dissatisfaction becomes the catalyst. It becomes the force that drives not only individual growth, but systemic transformation. And if we protect the schools that are designed to meet dissatisfaction in all its forms, especially the comprehensive dissatisfaction of catalytic students, we protect not just opportunity for a few, but agency for all. That is the call to action. And that is the work ahead. A Slice with Dice is a production of Aldercube. Thanks for making time to reflect with me. If you're finding value in these episodes, I hope you'll subscribe and help spread the word. Until next week, lead boldly, listen closely, and keep pushing forward. I'll see you then.